what do you think are some of the main principles or elements of sustainable town planning that are really important?
I've been thinking for a number of years that Clunes really does need a plan as far as future planning within the community. The zoning and everything is really haphazard, and there isn't really any design guidelines at all around what people can build, sizes of subdivisions, all that sort of thing, and that does concern me, that potentially if we don't put something in place, we're going to get a lot of developers coming up here and turning us into a mini Melbourne. And then we'll lose the country feel. So what I'd really like to see happen is a strategic plan for Clunes, which looks at minimum block sizes within each of the zones, and types of buildings that you can build, and things like setbacks, amount of garden area, so that we're retaining the feel of our community. So, for example, at the moment, township zone blocks, there's no minimum subdivision size. So currently you can subdivide down to 400 square metres, which is tiny. But I'd like to see that be a minimum of, say, 1,000 square metres. And then things like rural living zone, we've got a lot of rural living zone blocks that are also don't have a minimum subdivision size, or if they do, it's something like an acre, which is really quite small in those sort of areas. So I'd like to see those be 10 acres minimum, and low density residential zone, have that as maybe 5 acres minimum, so that, and we can maintain, so people move to an area, they really like this rural living zone area, all the blocks are 10 acres, they know that in future it's not going to be subdivided down and their lifestyle isn't going to be impacted. And it also future planning, maybe changing zones so that some areas are designated for more rural living, or even remove some of the low density residential zones and change them to rural living. So it'd be a really big project, but I think it's really important to ensure that Clunes is maintained as that country living place you want to live, that has the, I guess, quality of life. You've got a nice backyard, all that sort of thing. So
essentially a plan that provides a template to protect the space and the value of space and how it's used in a way that's not compromising people's way of life.
Absolutely.
The things that a regional space can offer as opposed to a metropolitan space.
Exactly.
Or some templates elsewhere where people have actually insisted on a strategic plan that's sort of come to fruition in a way that
there are some areas. Buninyong has minimum block sizes of 800 square metres, which is really good, and minimum garden area of 35%. So they're protecting that in, I guess, the density of housing. Dalesford have a lot more overlays that are protecting things like style of house, setbacks, and things like making sure people are planting trees and retaining the feel. So there is definitely examples that we could draw on where we're going to put a plan in place.
And it's really evident when you go to a place like Buninyong, and it's actually cooler with the shade of trees and things like that, and cultivation of soil as opposed to letting things go however they may happen. They may not necessarily insist on those kinds of sustainable principles.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I mean, I think the council probably don't go in as much detail as we could potentially go. So if we develop a plan, we can put in some other things that are really important to the township of Clunes, as far as sustainable communities and planning around certain, areas of town and things like that. That, I mean, council generally, they don't live in town, so it's quite important to get.
And they might have some good initiatives like tree planting, for example, but then it may not go to the extent of maintenance and how to actually keep it going.
Yeah, sure.
So that's really, if it was coming from a community perspective, there might be more ownership and likelihood of it being able to continue and grow as intended.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. It makes a massive difference when community feels part of a decision and they have ownership, as you say. Yeah, it makes a massive difference.
In terms of Clunes-centred initiatives and being the local region being independent to a certain extent in terms of planning, what are some of your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I really feel quite strongly about the community being more independent from, I guess, other communities, Melbourne, and external impacts. And I think in
terms of funding or planning and such.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the more things that we can implement that are, I guess, that we're all supporting each other rather than relying on external sources for the support, the better we're going to be able to cope with crises that may happen in the future, which could be financial, maybe the World Bank collapses, maybe the peak oil crisis happens, maybe it's nothing that drastic, but if we have our own supportive community, we're going to be able to survive those sort of situations better if we're not relying on external sources. And I think a lot of the projects that have already been implemented in town have made a big difference, and we are quite a close-knit supportive community already, but I think there's definitely things we can do to improve that. Things like supporting solar initiatives and all that sort of thing, and sustainability on an environmental level, all those things, fantastic. I think mental health is a big thing, and the more things we can implement to be able to support each other.
And be more sufficient.
Yeah, absolutely.
Stronger
so
with
things
more
like
capacity, less reliant on external.
Yeah, absolutely. So women's groups, men's groups, all those sort of things, so you can come and be supported within those spaces. Then, youth support, that are already doing some amazing stuff up at the neighbourhood house, and I'm sure that's going to continue and grow, and that's so important because a lot of kids are, it's a hard time, isn't it, growing up, and if you've got pressures at home and all that sort of thing, having that support for our youth is really important to help them, get the best out of life. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, we can maybe think about some sort of homeless support down the track. I mean, that's a big project.
For example.
Yeah.
To accommodate refugees.
Yeah. And there is homeless people in town, you wouldn't know it, but I guess they're pretty on the down low, but there are homeless people in town, and, if we could set up a small, like a tiny house community, which is maybe an offshoot of the neighbourhood house and has a worker that supervises it. When people are down and out, they know that they've got that support there, and they're not potentially getting into situations that are going to be harmful for them. You know, if they're desperate, you know, people do crazy things. And there's so many amazing programs around the place with unemployment, you know, training people. I think the community garden, unfortunately, has sort of interest has died a bit, but I think that was one of the projects I thought could be really amazing, because I've seen some amazing things happening down in Werribee with refugees working at the community garden, and then their children are inspired and they want to be working in, so they'll do a traineeship, and then they're our next horticulturalists, and you know, people are getting skills. They're also getting a lot of emotional support. You know, doing gardening and other activities can just be so amazing for mental health. So if you're going through a hard time, you're homeless, you're unemployed, you know, having some support like that and somewhere to go and to feel like you're actually doing something valuable can be really, really
important.
Yeah.
Sort of, thanks for bringing up that sort of holistic, integrated approach to a community, because it's so important, and it's something that often people aspire to, and with sort of like corporate structures it can be difficult to sort of navigate all that, but as you say, at a local level there's a lot of things that we can do to build resilience and
absolutely.
on a holistic level.
And I think, you know, Queens has an amazing community, and anything's possible, and I think, you know, we can do amazing things here. So excited.